Victoria, and I'm 32 years old. My millionaire husband just stood up in a packed courtroom and called me sterile, claiming I'd trapped him in a childless marriage built on lies. His attorney was waving documents around like victory flags, ready to prove how my infertility violated our prenuptial agreement and entitled Derek to keep every single dollar of his fortune. He sat there in his custom-tailored suit, playing the devastated husband whose dreams of fatherhood had been crushed by his defective wife. The judge looked sympathetic. The gallery was practically salivating. And me? I reached into my purse, pulled out a manila envelope, and smiled for the first time in 3 years. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever been completely blindsided by someone you trusted, because what happened next will restore your faith in justice. Let me rewind 3 years and show you exactly how I ended up. Married to a complete fraud. Picture this. I'm working as an events coordinator at a luxury hotel in Manhattan, when Derek Ashford walks into my life like he's auditioning for a romance movie. 6'2", perfectly styled hair with just enough silver to look distinguished, blue eyes that could sell anything, and a smile that probably cost more than my annual salary. He needed someone to plan his investment firm's annual gala, and lucky me got assigned to make his every wish come true. Money is no object, he told me during our first meeting, leaning across my desk with an intensity that made my pulse race. I need perfection, and I think you're exactly the person to deliver it. Famous last words, right? But back then, I was completely mesmerized by this man who seemed too good to be true, which should have been my first clue that he absolutely was. Derek sent flowers to my studio apartment every single day for a week, took me to restaurants where the sommelier knew his preferences better than I knew my own name. And when he proposed on his penthouse balcony with Central Park stretched out below us, and a ring that could have funded a small nation, I genuinely believed I'd won the relationship lottery. The wedding was something out of a magazine spread that Derek probably referenced when planning it. He spared absolutely no expense on the designer gown, the celebrity planner, the guest list that read like a Forbes convention. His business partner Ryan flew in from Boston to serve as best man, giving this touching speech about brotherhood and building empires together that had everyone reaching for their champagne glasses while I stood there in my perfect dress feeling like the luckiest woman alive. Ryan seemed like the devoted friend every successful man deserves, always present, always supportive, always standing just a little too close to my husband in every wedding photo. But I was too busy playing Cinderella to notice that my prince might prefer a different kind of fairy tale ending. Our honeymoon in Tuscany should have been my wake-up call. We were staying at this incredible villa with vineyard views that stretched toward forever, and I was practically glowing with newlywed happiness when I brought up the subject over breakfast on our private terrace. Derek, I've been thinking about starting a family. Maybe we could begin trying when we get back home. His espresso cup froze halfway to his lips like I'd just suggested we burn down the villa. That's wonderful, darling. But let's not rush into anything, he said with practiced ease. We should enjoy being married first. Really savor this time together before we complicate things. Reasonable, right? Except enjoying being married apparently meant Derek working 16-hour days while I decorated our penthouse and planned dinner parties for his business associates who talked about markets and mergers while I smiled and refilled wine glasses. Every single time I mentioned children, he had another excuse. Already loaded and ready to fire. The company was expanding into new markets. The economic climate was too volatile. He wanted to take me to Paris first, or Tokyo, or literally anywhere that would change the subject away from the family I desperately wanted. But those trips were absolutely flawless productions where Derek transformed back into Prince Charming, holding my hand through the Louvre, kissing me on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset, posting romantic photos with captions about his beautiful wife that made his followers comment about relationship goals and ask when we'd have babies. If only they could see us behind closed doors, where my husband treated me like expensive furniture that looked good but served no real purpose. The moment we'd return from any trip, Derek would vanish into his office faster than my hopes for our marriage. And our bedroom felt less like a sanctuary, and more like a museum, where everything was beautiful but completely untouchable. My friend Nina, who'd known me since college and worked as a nurse with a talent for reading people, was the first to call out what I'd been trying to ignore. Victoria, when's the last time Derek actually asked how you're feeling about anything that matters to you? She asked during one of our monthly brunches, studying my face like I was exhibiting concerning symptoms. I couldn't answer because I genuinely couldn't remember a single meaningful conversation we'd had in months. The breaking point came on our second anniversary when I'd planned this romantic evening complete with his favorite restaurant reservation, a bottle of wine we'd shared on our wedding night, and lingerie that cost more than most people's mortgage payments. I wanted desperately to feel connected to my husband again, to remember why we'd fallen in love. Derek came home 3 hours late with barely a glance in my direction. "Sorry, darling," he said while loosening his tie and scrolling through his phone. "Ryan and I were reviewing quarterly projections, and you know how time disappears when you're strategizing expansion plans." There, I stood in our living room wearing a dress that hugged every curve, makeup perfect, hope dying its slow and painful death, while my husband suggested we order takeout from that Thai place I liked. Takeout on our anniversary while I stood there dressed for seduction, feeling like the world's most expensive fool. That night, while Derek showered claiming he needed to wash off the stress, because apparently stress is something you can scrub away with luxury soap, I picked up his phone knowing it was wrong but feeling like I was drowning and needed to understand why. His text messages were surprisingly innocent at first glance, just business conversations with Ryan and scheduling with his assistant, no steamy exchanges with mysterious women. But something about the way he and Ryan texted felt different, comfortable in a way Derek never seemed with me anymore, with inside jokes and easy intimacy that made me envious of their friendship. I started paying attention to things I'd previously ignored because I'd been too busy playing the perfect wife. The way Derek's entire demeanor would transform when Ryan walked into a room, suddenly animated and genuinely laughing, more alive than I'd seen him in our entire marriage. They'd stand just slightly too close during business discussions, their conversations flowing with an ease that made me feel like an outsider in my own home. "Ryan is coming for Thanksgiving," Derek announced one November evening, not asking my opinion but informing me like I was his personal assistant. "Of course he is," I replied without bothering to hide my sarcasm. Would it be a holiday without Ryan? Should I set a permanent place for him at every celebration? Derek shot me a sharp look before saying Ryan was family and didn't have anywhere else to go, which was interesting considering Ryan had parents in Connecticut and a sister in Boston, but apparently, our dinner table was his true home. During Christmas dinner, I watched them like I was studying for the most important exam of my life, noting the shared glances and the way Ryan could make Derek laugh with just a raised eyebrow, observing the comfortable silence between them that spoke entire volumes. Then came my life-changing discovery when Derek forgot to lock his home office safe, something that never happened because my husband was more obsessive about security than a government facility. I knew I shouldn't look, knew I was crossing every possible line, but my marriage was already shattered, and I needed to understand why I was living with a stranger. Most of the contents were exactly what you'd expect, until I found a manila envelope tucked between property deeds, with a medical clinic's logo, and a date from 3 years before we'd even met. My hands shook as I opened it and read the words that changed everything. Vasectomy consultation and procedure confirmation. Voluntary. Sterilization completed successfully. Patient counseled on permanence of procedure. Let that sink in for just a moment. My husband had spent 3 years letting me believe I was broken, while he'd literally made sure we could never have children. And suddenly every conversation about our future family revealed itself as an Oscar-worthy performance built on calculated lies. I photographed every document with trembling hands before carefully returning everything to its exact position, because if Derek thought he was the only one who could play the long game, he was about to learn otherwise. The next few weeks were absolute torture as I sat across from Derek at dinner making small talk while inside I was screaming loud enough to wake the dead. I watched him chat with Ryan about their latest ventures, and suddenly, their entire relationship took on a completely different dimension. And I realized Ryan must have known about the vasectomy, because you don't maintain a decades-long friendship without knowing your partner's medical history, especially when that history directly impacts the woman he married. During a dinner party we hosted, I watched Ryan adjust Derek's tie in a gesture that lasted just a beat too long, and their eyes met with something that explained absolutely everything. Genuine, deep, romantic love, not friendship or business partnership but the real thing. I excused myself to the kitchen and gripped the marble countertop until my knuckles turned white, understanding finally that Derek had married me as cover, a beautiful, successful wife to parade around while living his real life with Ryan. And when our childless marriage inevitably failed because I couldn't get pregnant through his voluntary sterilization, The prenuptial agreement I'd signed without reading carefully would let him keep his fortune while playing the victim of a defective woman. I hired a private investigator named Lisa Martinez who specialized in matrimonial cases and had the kind of track record that suggested she'd seen every flavor of marital deception imaginable. I need to know if my husband is having an affair, I told her during our first meeting at a coffee shop in Queens, far from anywhere Derek or Ryan might stumble upon us. Lisa was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and professional, with a no-nonsense attitude I wished I'd possessed 3 years earlier. "Give me 3 weeks," she said after I'd explained everything. "If there's something to find, I'll find it." Those 3 weeks felt like 3 years as I continued playing the devoted wife while building my case for liberation. Derek noticed nothing different about my behavior, which told me everything about how much attention he'd ever actually paid to his real wife versus his imaginary perfect spouse. Lisa called on a Tuesday morning while Derek was at the gym with Ryan, their daily routine that now seemed like perfect cover. "We need to meet," she said simply. "I have what you're looking for." The photographs were absolutely damning. Derek and Ryan leaving a midtown hotel that wasn't the kind of place you'd go for business meetings, holding hands across a table at a village restaurant, kissing in Ryan's apartment building doorway at midnight when Derek had told me he was working late. "From what I can tell, at least since college," Lisa explained as I stared at the evidence. "They're very careful and discreet, but there are patterns everywhere once you know what to look for. Your husband has been living a double life for a very long time." I felt strangely calm absorbing this information because the betrayal was complete now, no more wondering or second-guessing, just cold, hard evidence that Derek had built our entire relationship on lies elaborate enough to make politicians jealous. "I want a divorce," I announced on a Thursday evening, standing in Derek's office doorway while he reviewed reports. My voice came out stronger and clearer than I'd expected from all those weeks of rehearsal. Derek barely looked up because why would he when I was just his decorative wife? "Don't be dramatic, Summer. Whatever's bothering you, we can discuss rationally like adults." "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "I want out of this marriage, and I filed papers that you'll be served tomorrow morning." That got his attention, and I watched calculation flicker in his eyes before his expression settled into what I recognized as his negotiation face. "You might want to reconsider," he said with barely concealed threat. "Remember our prenuptial agreement? You signed away quite a lot of rights when you were so eager to become Mrs. Ashford." "I know about Ryan," I said, and watched his face go completely blank. "Of course you don't," he replied, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Oh, and Derek," I added from the doorway. "You might want to call your lawyer because you're going to need the best legal team money can buy. Trust me on this one." The divorce proceedings were exactly as brutal as expected, with Derek hiring expensive lawyers who filed motion after motion, questioning my mental state and fitness as a spouse. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, and somehow the media had caught wind that Morrison Investment Group's founder was getting divorced. I arrived early in a navy suit that projected competence while Derek came with his legal team and Ryan there as moral support. They huddled together whispering strategies and shooting confident glances my direction like they'd already won. I sat with my attorney Morgan Hayes, who specialized in impossible cases and had never lost to a corporate giant yet. "Are you ready?" Morgan asked quietly. I patted my purse, feeling the manila envelope's weight. "I've been ready for months." The hearing began with Derek's lawyer painting him as the devoted husband whose wife had become unstable and demanding, presenting our prenuptial agreement like a magic trick, and highlighting the clause that would leave me with minimal assets if our marriage ended due to my inability to provide children. My client entered this marriage with the express understanding that they would start a family, his attorney intoned like he was delivering a sermon. When it became clear that Mrs. Ashford was unable to fulfill this essential aspect of their agreement, the relationship deteriorated beyond repair. Unable to fulfill. Those words were chosen deliberately to make me sound defective and broken and less than a complete woman. Then Derek's lawyer made his fatal mistake, looking directly at me with a smug smile that said he thought he'd already won. "Furthermore, Your Honor, medical evidence will show that Mrs. Ashford is in fact infertile, and my client has endured 3 years of false hope." "Your Honor," I said standing up, "I have evidence I'd like to present to the court." I walked to the judge's bench and placed that beautiful manila envelope in his hands, watching as he opened it and examined the vasectomy records, the private investigators' photographs showing Derek and Ryan in hotels and restaurants and doorways, bank statements documenting their secret dates, phone records proving late-night calls while Derek claimed to be working. Judge Harrison's expression grew darker with each page before he finally looked up, his gaze moving from Derek to Ryan to me like he was watching the world's most expensive scandal unfold. "Mr. Ashford," he said with barely contained disgust, "would you care to explain these documents?" Derek's lawyer jumped up requesting a continuance, but Judge Harrison held up one of the photographs showing Derek kissing Ryan and asked if they were suggesting it was somehow fabricated. I watched Derek's carefully constructed world crumble in real time, and after 3 years of being made to feel broken and insufficient, watching him squirm felt like justice served with a side of perfect karma. In light of this evidence, the judge continued, "I'm ruling that the prenuptial agreement is void, due to fraud, and I'm awarding Mrs. Ashford 50% of all marital assets, including primary residence, vacation properties, and a substantial portion of the investment firm." Derek shot to his feet like he'd been electrocuted, but the judge cut him off coldly, explaining that I'd been entitled to transparency about his intentions and fertility status, and instead, he'd committed fraud on a scale that shocked the court's conscience. Within 48 hours, news of Derek's deception had spread through Manhattan's financial world like wildfire, and his business associates started distancing themselves immediately because nobody wanted association with a man who'd committed marriage fraud. I moved back into the penthouse while Derek packed his belongings like a defeated general. "This isn't over," he said on his last day. "You have no idea how to run a business. You'll lose everything within a year." I smiled from his favorite leather chair where he used to read reports while ignoring me. "You spent 3 years treating me like I was too stupid to notice your lies, too weak to fight back, too dependent to survive alone. And yet here we are." The penthouse felt different once Derek was gone, larger somehow, like it could finally breathe without his suffocating presence, and I started making it actually mine by donating his precious art collection to the Metropolitan Museum and letting them deal with his legacy while I built my own. I hired Catherine Brooks as CEO, a woman with 15 years of experience and a reputation for turning around struggling companies, and together we rebranded as Meridian Capital Partners for a fresh start. The first 6 months were brutal as we lost 40% of our client base, but slowly we started attracting new investors, intrigued by our story of transparency and ethics rising from fraud's ashes. 2 years later, we weren't just surviving but thriving with 300% portfolio growth and offices in Chicago and Los Angeles. Then came my final triumph when Derek's original company went up for sale, bleeding money and desperate for buyers. I purchased it anonymously for $12 million, and when Derek called after discovering who'd bought his life's work, his voice was flat and defeated. "Why?" he asked, like a wounded animal. "You've already taken everything, why this too?" "I didn't take anything from you, Derek," I replied peacefully. "I simply stopped letting you take from me, and now I'm rebuilding your company with honesty instead of lies." But the real surprise came at a charity gala when I met Dr. Adam Parker, a pediatric surgeon recently divorced himself and refreshingly unimpressed by my business success. We talked for 3 hours, and when he asked me to dinner, I almost said no because trusting another man felt about as appealing as voluntary root canal surgery. But something about Adam felt genuinely different, and 6 months later I was staring at a pregnancy test showing 2 pink lines, feeling emotions I couldn't name. After everything Derek had put me through, the years of thinking I was broken, the public humiliation of being called sterile by a man who'd sterilized himself, I was actually pregnant. When Emma Rose Parker was born on a snowy Tuesday morning weighing 7 pounds 2 ounces with dark hair and her father's determined chin, I finally understood what true victory looked like. It wasn't the financial success, or professional recognition, or even watching Derek's empire crumble. True victory was holding my daughter in my arms, knowing I'd survived everything that tried to break me, and emerged stronger, wiser, and infinitely more capable of love than I'd ever thought possible. Adam proposed when Emma was 6 months old with his grandmother's simple gold band and a promise to spend his life being worthy of my trust, and we married in a small garden ceremony, surrounded by people who'd supported me through the darkest period of my life. If this story resonated with you, drop your thoughts in the comments below and share your own experience of fighting for what you deserved. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of people who turned betrayal into triumph, because sometimes those who underestimate us give us the greatest gift of all: the motivation to prove them spectacularly wrong.